interpretation, and we actually go inside, so to speak. We go into our own psyche. What's your take on that, Mitch?
I think it's kind of a combination of the two. I think we are tapping into this other realm. However, I think it's more of our own kind of ego and cultural structures, whether it be from religion, politics, or whatever, that gives us a different interpretation of what those experiences are. I think you can say that we are going into this quantum mind, but I think that quantum mind is also this, interconnectedness of all life on not only this planet, but beyond. But it gets back to that personal interpretation. And I think that's why there are a lot of similarities to the way people describe their experiences, but they are seen slightly different. So some people see angels as opposed to aliens. And it's just those slight little tweaks. But if we really look at the base of them, they are the same or very similar. And again, I think it's you can look at the positive and negative aspect of it. Depending on where people are in their own lives, their, what they've experienced, where they are psychologically, the set and setting, which is a very important part of it, can influence what that experience is like. However, at the same time, I would say across the board of the 10 people that we chatted with, and even others that weren't in the experiments, regularly said this was, the most profound experience of their life and had changed them dramatically, and for the better. Not all those experiences were positive for some people, but it did have an effect on how they viewed the world and how they interacted with people.
Do you think that this is an explanation for the alien phenomena that we see out there as well? It seems to me that there could be an explanation for some of them, at least, if I put it that way, and obviously, again, that doesn't imply that people who are having the alien experiences are going out there and taking DMT, but we could be talking about a situation where people actually have a release of DMT or a production of DMT in their own brain, and obviously an effect or a consequence of this is some kind of spiritual experience, and some might experience this as you said, Mitch, meeting angels, while others see meeting demons or even abducted by aliens. But what's your take on that, Mitch?
Well, I like to go back to kind of my childhood, and years prior to trying any sort of psychedelic or entheogen, I had some experiences that were very DMT-like, and some of these experiences from some of my earliest memories from the age of 2 and 3, and even one specific one that I was about 6, where I had what I felt like, and still to this day feels what happened, was an entity contact or an alien contact. But I was in my room on my bed, and no, I wasn't taken anywhere physically. But very similar experience to what I've experienced with DMT. So I would say, yeah, I think that there is that the fact that it is within us, and there could be an overproduction or, a slight overproduction even maybe can cause it to open up that door. So I think it's possible that you don't necessarily need the external source of DMT to have these experiences.
And you have about 40, far as I count, about 49, 50 participants or people, adding from their own input during the film. Some people we've had on this program, like Graham Hancock and obviously Rick Strassman, a few others, and we're going to have upcoming people like Jeremy Narby that you have in there as well. Is there anything you'd like to mention or talk about in terms of some of the people that you interview as well?
Well, first of all, I'm just extremely blessed to be able to talk to all these people and to interview them, and I'd like to really thank Dr. Strassman for that. He was integral in setting up a lot of these interviews. In a lot of ways, I felt like I've received a brand new degree in some ways. Mm-hmm. It started off this new area of research, and then being able to sit down and talk to all these amazing minds has really opened up my thought process. And the other part about it, I think, in general, is that we tried to look at people within cultural critique, writers, philosophers, people within religion or spirituality, medical doctors. And so tried to cover a wide range of disciplines and tried to get a sense of where their perspective was on DMT within the culture. The other part about it, because we have such a huge collection of individuals, my goal is to be able to release this library of information via Creative Commons. So this information doesn't just sit in my sit in my vault, so to speak, and it can get out there, because I really do think it's a very positive and powerful thing that should be shared with the world. Too many amazing minds that we've interviewed that for that stuff to just sit there.
Absolutely. And so what you mentioned before there that quickly that it might be being considered to be a kind of a taboo subject in the past of psychedelics. There hasn't really been that much exploration in terms of the audiovisual medium before. I mean, there's an old documentary called Beyond the Within that's examining the LSD aspect, of course. Documentary film based on the same the book rather by Sidney Cohen. He wrote a book with the same name, but otherwise beyond that, there's just a few little pieces scattered here and there about this kind of about this particular subject, and as far as I know, then nothing specifically on DMT. But why do you think that is? Why has this been taboo, and has this been released now? Is it okay now after some of the academics like Rick Strassman has been in there and kind of explored this particular subject? Do you think?
I don't think it's there 100%, but I think it's happening. We're getting there, and just beginning an open dialogue again about these things, because, and again, I'll just speak from kind of a Western or more American perspective of what happened here with psychedelics. Once the 60s hit and LSD hit the streets, it was probably very alarming to the powers that be that, people having these experiences could really change the dynamic of culture. And there was a big, backlash to that. The excuse me, the big backlash to that, and the government, put a stop to it and essentially used propaganda to make sure that everyone knew that these things were extremely dangerous, could cause psychosis, could cause you to commit suicide, and a range of other different ways that they describe things. So I experienced that firsthand once I started pitching this film and seeing how people understood these compounds, and really seeing that there was a huge amount of misinformation out there. So I think that's kind of built up over time, and it's just kind of put itself back in culture over and over and over again. And there's a knee-jerk reaction out there to psychedelics in general.
You think that this is part of the war on drugs in that sense then as well? And if so, would you say that this is a drug that is for everybody? Is there any precautions that needs to be taken? Maybe this is you need a certain, I don't know how to put that, but a different kind of background, I guess, in one sense on certain topics. Or what I'm saying is that I hear often that these kinds of the entheogenic drugs they're not obviously party drugs, so to speak. This is meant for another type of experience. And would you agree with that, Mitch?
Absolutely. And in fact, I would like to say they're definitely not something to take lightly. They're not something to take for granted, and they are definitely not a party drug. I even like to try to stay away from the word drug, just because of the implications that come along with that and how people understand that. I don't think they're for everybody, and they should be, again, pursued with caution. If Dr. Strassman knew this very well and looked at this within the study, by screening people very carefully and looking at, what sort of physical ailments they might have, but, even more importantly, what sort of psychological issues might be going on, because they can affect people very profoundly. And if not screened correctly, then it could have a negative impact on individuals. But definitely not something that you would find at a party. And I think that's one of the reasons that they haven't turned up at a party is, these aren't the kind of things that you would take and want to sit around and have a good time on, so to speak. So.
Right. And in many cases, it seems like, again, then that these things are, we hear lies about these drugs. They're being suppressed in another way, if we compare to some of the other more, if I can put it this way, than mainstream drugs out there in that sense. And what aspect do you think? What's the reason for that? I'm thinking about, I guess, why this experience that one might have with this drug, though, is life-changing. Why is this important, so to speak, and what can it teach us? Do you think that it's something within that the powers that be are trying to withhold from people, if I can put it that way?
Ooh, this always becomes a slippery one. I do. I think that there is... It's always hard to say, like, a conscious effort, but I do think on some level there is that thought of, people having these experiences and realizing that, as human beings, we are all capable of spiritual experiences, and we don't necessarily need that middleman anymore to have that experience. So if people are out there having these experiences, these structures that we've built up for thousands of years begin to crumble. And because of that, I think it's very, very possible that the powers that be, again, politically or through religion or just culture, are trying to suppress that. And it's going to be hard to do, I think, because the bigger part of this movement, I think, that's happening is this. It's the entheogenic. There's a ceremonial aspect built into this, and it's not just the party aspect.
Right, yeah. And how do you see then in terms of this? I guess the impact of the documentary. How do you think it will be received, and what do you hope for the film to achieve? I guess in one way.
I think in general, just to have people understand that these compounds are not what they think they are, and the implications of these things can really. I think we're kind of probing the basis for kind of moral and ethical behavior with these things. When we're able to pull apart or take away these structures, it really shows you and also emotionally shows you the connections that we have to everything in the world. And once we're able to kind of see that, that changes culture a lot and allows people to get past just the idea that the reality that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis is the only reality. And
that's obviously that's the point of argumentation here as well. Do you think that this is the fields are beginning to bridge a little bit as well in terms of science and spirituality? We've heard this in the if I can call it the alternative circles for quite a few years now in terms of how science is merging with spirituality in that sense. Because if we look deep enough into the science that are out there at least at this point, then things are becoming more and more weird. The closer we look at things, the more they kind of fall apart in terms of the laws that we thought were applicable, if I put it that way. So definitely. Reality seems to be something else than we think it is. And do you think again then that this particular molecule, as it were, is part of this discovery as well? Do you think that this will lead us elsewhere in terms of our science and understanding of reality as well? Maybe.
Definitely, it should. And the one thing that excited me the most, especially when I started to do my research, was the fact that this compound exists within us naturally. So when you start looking at that scientifically, why is this compound all over nature? Potentially every living organism has DMT in it. But then once you start looking and then flip that a little bit and you have this as a compound that exists naturally, ask that question with God, however you understand that. But most people that do pray to God or a God believe that, that God put everything here for a particular reason. And if that's the case, then DMT has a place, and we should be looking at it and seeing about how this thing can teach us more about ourselves, but also the universe.
What do you think in terms of chemistry as well, then? Do you think that it's all just happening in the brain, or has this something to do with spirituality, true spirituality in that sense? Do you take this from a materialistic point of view or more from a spiritual point of view, Mitch?
Well, I think this really is a portal. And I think the fact that even if it is something that's just happening in the mind, I don't think it diminishes, the emotional impact that it has on people. And like you said, that, more times than not is a spiritual experience. And even if that is just a product of the mind, how fascinating is that? How if we have this little compound in there and it's just showing us, this kind of loop of information going on in our head, it's pretty fascinating. And I think it's something that we should explore. And if it is just that thing, it's definitely something to push and actually pursue because of the spiritual component of it.
Absolutely. And is there any favorite interviews that you've done with some of the people out there? Is there anyone that particularly you feel added to your own personal learning curve and in terms of knowledge and things like that? Any favorite interviewees that you have out there?
Well, I think each one of them was great in their own right. A couple that stick out, but Dennis McKenna was probably up on my list, and That's just from doing a lot of reading of the McKenna brothers, Terrence, of course, and then Dennis. And those guys just kind of being